Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I'm doing a series review of the Warrior Bards trilogy by Juliet Marillier. The first book in the trilogy is The Harp of Kings, the second book is A Dance with Fate, and the third book is A Song of Flight, which just recently came out. The Warrior Bards trilogy is a historical fantasy series set in early medieval Ireland. It is set in the same world as some of Marillier's other books, like the Seven Waters series and the Blackthorn and Grimm trilogy, and later in this video I'm going to talk about the order that you should read the series, or if you need to read series before others, because I've gotten a couple of questions about that. So I will talk about that a little bit later. Also, there will be content warnings for the series in the description below. So in this series, we are following three main characters, three main points of view, which are Livon, Brock, and Dow. All three of these characters are young warriors who are training and vying for a position on Swan Island, which is this island where they train elite warriors. So all of them are trying to win a place there. Livon and Brock are also brother and sister, and they're also very talented musicians in addition to being warriors. Now, the characters themselves, Livon as a character, I think, is our main character. She is kind of hot-headed and impulsive at times. She doesn't always follow the rules that she's supposed to, but she's very intuitive and kind of follows that intuition. And she also has a very strong sense of justice that really drives her, sometimes gets her into trouble, but it also really motivates her as a character. And also as a character, something that I appreciate about her is just that she's a very good friend, which we find out throughout the series. Brock, her brother, while he can definitely hold his own as a warrior, his heart is much more in his music. At heart, he is a musician, a bard, he's a peacemaker and a storyteller. So his heart isn't really in being a warrior, but he followed Livon to Swan Island so that they could do this together. And then Dow is another one of these warriors that they've met. He comes from a noble family but has a very painful and traumatic past with them, which caused him to leave his family and join the Swan Island Warriors, and has really shaped who he is today, and also means that he is a fairly closed off person who has a hard time letting people in. And over the course of the series, all three of these characters, I think, really grow. In this series, each book has its own story, because in each book we're following a mission that they're going on as Swan Island warriors. But then over the course of the series, there's also an overarching storyline following the mystery of the Crow folk, which are these mysterious crow-like beings that come from the other world, or the uncanny world, and they are terrorizing people, but also Brock believes might have their own reasons for doing what they're doing and might have their own tragic backstory. So we're following that mystery over the whole series, but then each book has its own mission that it is following. So to go into briefly kind of what each of the books is about. In the first book, The Harp of Kings, we're following our three main characters as they are vying for their places on Swan Island, and not all of the young warriors are getting along at that point, especially Dow and Livon butt heads quite a bit, but as they are training, they actually get assigned to a mission. The mission requires somebody to go undercover as a musician, and since Livon and Brock are both very talented musicians, they are chosen to go on this mission. And then Dow is also assigned to go with them. So the mission itself is to recover the Harp of Kings. So there is a local king, or someone who is about to be crowned king, and in this kingdom there is a harp that is traditionally played at the coronation, but this harp has disappeared, and the king believes that if it is not recovered and played at his coronation, the people of this kingdom believe that it's bad luck, his rule won't be respected, all of this. So they are searching for the lost harp, and as they are searching for it, it becomes a question as to, was it humans who stole this harp, or was it maybe beings from the other world? In this book, we are also first introduced to the crow folk. Then in the second book, which is A Dance with Fate, Tao is injured in a training accident which causes him to become blind, and because of that he has to go back to his family home to either live or recover. However, he has a very traumatic past with his family, so not only does he have to deal with being injured, recently becoming blind, having to leave his his home and his job and community on Swan Island, but now he has to go confront his family and his past traumas. When he goes there, Levon goes with him because she was involved in the training accident. So she is going with Tao as a bond servant for 1 year to make amends for her involvement in his accident. But when they get there, they discover that there may be some more nefarious things going on, even worse than what Tao knew of his family before he left them years ago. And so there are some things going on that they find out about that involve the crow folk. Once again, we get to learn more about the crow folk in this as they become more central to the story. And then while all of that is going on, Brock is off kind of on his own singular mission by himself. This second book was actually my favorite in the trilogy. I think that it was the most emotional in the trilogy. I think it had the most character and relationship development. We really got to like dig into the characters. It made me really appreciate a lot of the characters more. I think that Levon, you really see that she's such a good friend. We get to see Tao confronting his past and his inner demons, and I just really loved this second book. And then finally, the last book is A Song of Flight. And in this book, a prince has disappeared, and Brock and Levon's other brother, whose name is Galen, was a guard of the prince and was a close friend of his, and was there and was injured when the prince was taken. They don't really know who took him or where he went, but Galen was injured in the process. Then the Swan Island warriors are called in, including Tao as part of that group, are called in to help look for the prince and find out what happened to him. And they're looking for possible like political, rivalries and culprits in the human world, but as they learn more and more, Tao begins to suspect that it once again may involve the uncanny. Meanwhile, Levon is tasked with training a new recruit among the Swan Island warriors, and Brock is really struggling with conflicting priorities between his responsibilities to his family and learning more about the crow folk, because he really believes that the crow folk are misunderstood and there is a reason why they are here and why they are acting the way that they are. In this book, while the plotline of the prince being or taken or disappearing is kind of like the inciting incident, that plotline really ends up taking a backseat to the story of the crow folk and what is going on with them. So we end up really finding out more about the crow folk and their stories and like why they're here and what's happening with them. So overall thoughts for this series. Overall, I really enjoyed it, which is not a surprise. Juliet Marillier is one of my favorite authors of all time. So I can pretty much depend on enjoying her books. As I said, the second book in the trilogy was definitely my favorite. It was the one that I really felt the most invested in and the most like, I just didn't want to put it down. I couldn't put it down. I wanted to keep reading and finding out what happened because I was just the most invested in the characters in that book. As always, Juliet Marillier's writing is always like beautiful and atmospheric. Her writing always brings in folklore and music and storytelling into it. I think that this series, maybe a little less densely written, a little less descriptive than some of her other books. Also, as always, Juliet Marillier can write a great slow burn romance. There is a romance in this series that I really, really liked. So I always love her slow burn romances. So ratings for the books in the series. The first book I gave 4 stars, the second book I gave 5 stars, and the third book I gave 4 stars as well. So overall, a really good series. And now we can talk about, do you need to read the other series before reading this one? So as I said, the Warrior Bards trilogy is set in the same world as the Seven Water series and the Blackthorn and Grimm trilogy. You definitely don't need to read the Seven Water series before reading Warrior Bards. Usually I do recommend people who are new to Juliet Marillier to start with Seven Waters if it sounds like something that appeals to them, because 1, it's a personal favorite, 2, I think it is her best work. But if you want to start with the Warrior Bards series, you don't have to read Seven Waters. The Blackthorn and Grimm trilogy, it's a little more, I think that you could definitely read Warrior Bards without having read Blackthorn and Grimm. The two series are more connected because these characters are connected to some characters from Blackthorn and Grimm, and there are some references to them. And some of the characters from Blackthorn and Grimm show up in the third book in Warrior Bards. So with the Warrior Bards trilogy, if that's where you want to start, I think that you could understand and enjoy the series without reading Blackthorn and Grimm. You might get some minor spoilers for Blackthorn and Grimm if you start with Warrior Bards, but I don't think it's anything major. The third book, there are some characters who are from Blackthorn and Grimm that will make more sense if you read that first. They'll have a little bit more context. The characters will probably feel a little more fleshed out if you read that series first. But overall, I think that you probably don't have to. So it's kind of up to you. Personally, I would read Blackthorn and Grimm first just because I like to have that kind of context for it, but I think that you could start with Warrior Bards. Anyway, that was a very roundabout explanation of it. Hopefully that helps you decide whether to start there or not. But that is all for my review of the Warrior Bards trilogy by Juliet Marillier. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!